All right, pick up your pencil. It's time to do some hyperbola homework. Here's number one. This is a hyperbola. We know because the x is squared and the y is squared, but one of them is negative. So it's already in general form, which is great. So all we have to do is move on and find the center, the vertices, the foci, the asymptotes, and sketch it as we go through. So let's start with the center. For the center, we look at the shifts. Right 4, down 1, 4, negative 1. Before we find the vertices, let's find A and B. So remember, for a hyperbola, A always comes from the positive side. It doesn't matter which one's bigger. It's whichever side is positive. Here it's the x's. So A is the square root of 4, which is 2. And B is from the negative side. Square root of 16 is 4. There's A squared, B squared. Now, let's go ahead and sketch what we know so far. I'm going to slide this over a little bit. Okay, so the center is at 4, 1. So let me count over 1, 2, 3, 4, and then down 1. So 4, negative 1. There's my center. And A is the distance from the center to the vertices in whichever direction A came from. So A comes from the x direction. So we're going to count left 2 and right 2. So there are my vertices. And since I counted it left and right, I put the plus or minus on the x value. 2 is how far I counted, and the negative 1 stays the same. Sorry, I missed the camera there. Now let's try the foci. Okay, so the foci. Recall here that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. C is the longest side for a hyperbola. So a squared would be 4, b squared would be 16, and so we add those together and take the square root. So square root of 20 is c. And I know that the square root of 16 is 4. I know that the square root of 25 is 5. So it's somewhere between 4 and 5. So when I count over, I'm going to count over about 4.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and a little more. And then over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll go a little further. So 1, 2, 3, 4.5. 1, 2, 3, 4.5. Okay, so those are my foci out there. So I've got the center, the vertices, the foci. Now, I need to find the equation of the asymptotes. And actually, before I find the equation, I'm going to sketch them on my graph. So remember, we use A and B as our rise and our run here. So B is equal to 4. So I'm going to count up and down 4. So I'm going to go up from each vertex. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to count up from both of those vertices. I'm also going to count down from each vertex. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So here's A, here's B. Now, I'm going to grab a straight edge and draw in my asymptotes so that they go through those points I just made and the center. And the other direction. Okay, so there's my graph. And now, to get the equations of the asymptotes, I use, first off, a point that both equations go through, that's the center. So remember, I'm using this equation. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So the y1 and the x1 will be the x and y values of the center. So the x and y values for the center are 4, 1. So that's y plus 1. We'll use the y value from the center there. So that's y plus 1. We'll leave a blank for the slope, and then x minus 4. Now, our slope is going to come from the a and the b. Let me zoom in there. So remember, the slope is the rise over the run. So here's my rise. In this case, the rise happens to be b, and the run is a. b is 4, a is 2. So my slope is 4 over 2, or plus or minus 2. Plus because one asymptote has a positive slope, one has a negative slope. So y plus 1 equals plus or minus 2 times x minus 4. There's the equation of actually both of my asymptotes because of the plus or minus. So now I go back to the picture, and from the vertices I'm going to draw in my hyperbola. And I want to make sure that I approach the asymptotes as I go off in each direction. So from the vertex, out that way, and out that way. And same thing from this vertex right here, out that way, and out that way. Okay, there's my hyperbola. Okay, so let's move on now to number 2. So, if we look at number 2, again we see x and y are both squared, but we have one that's positive, one that's negative. Therefore, this will be a hyperbola when we graph it. Now, to get it into standard form, just like with an ellipse, we want to have a 1 on the right-hand side. So we're going to divide everything by 400. Divided by 400. Divided by 400. Divided by 400. And we'll see what happens. So, 400 divided by 400. 1. 25 over 400. Both of those will reduce by 25. So that's going to leave us with y squared over 16. And then the 16 and 400 can both be divided by, well, 400. So that gives us, by 16. That gives us x plus 2 squared. It's still going to be negative over 25. Now, we're in standard form, so we're going to do the same thing we did on the last problem. I'm going to get the center. Let me go over here. Which is at left 2 and up 0. So the center is at negative 2, 0. Don't worry if there's not a number next to y. It can be, think about that as y minus 0 squared. There's our center. And now, before we find the vertices, we're going to find a and b, because that's what we're used to doing. So a is going to come from not the bigger number, but the positive side. So the 16 is with the positive value, so we'll use that for a. A is 4, and b is 5. Okay? And so the vertices, we're going to count, because a comes from the y direction, that's our major axis, we're going to count up and down from the center. So the vertices, we're going to start at negative 2, 0, and count up or down 4. We always use a for the vertices. It always comes from the major axis direction, the positive one. So let's graph what we have so far. Okay, so negative 2, 0. There's the center. And then the vertices are going to be up and down, so we're going to count up and down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Vertex, vertex. Okay, now we need to find the foci. To do that, we need c. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. So a squared would be 16, b squared would be 25. That means c squared is going to be the square root of 16 plus 25, 41. Now, 36 has a square root, that's 6. 49 has a square root, that's 7. So we're somewhere in between 6 and 7. So we'll count up 6 and a little extra. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and some more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and some more. Okay. Now we need the asymptotes. So what we're going to do is first write out the equation. That we're going to use. This is point slope equation for a line. And now let's figure out what the slope and point are going to be. So the point's always going to be the center, -2, 0. So -2 is the x value. Since it's minus a negative, we'll make that a +2. And then 0 for the y. And what about the slope? Well, recall, to find the slope, we use b. So we count over b, which is 5, and the x direction, because that's where b came from. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we count over not from the center, but actually from the vertex. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the other vertex. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to count to the left 5 as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So from each vertex, right there. Okay? So here we have this. And now we want to, actually I'm going to go ahead and put in, there's my A. That's the major axis, and then B is the value we use to count over. So our slope is going to be rise A over B. Run. So 4 over 5. And it's going to be plus or minus. Okay, so now I'm going to use a straight edge to put in these asymptotes. You can see I got a little offline there. And over here, same thing. Okay, there are my asymptotes. So now I'm going to draw in the hyperbola. So from the vertex, I'm going to go out this way, out this way, and same thing from the top vertex. So I have a hyperbola, a vertical hyperbola. It opens up and down. And I know that, again, from looking at the equation, because the y is positive. The y is the major axis. Here's number 3. To put this one into general form, we need to complete the square. And again, we know this is going to be a hyperbola because we have the x squared and the y squared, but one of them is negative. And we know it's going to be a horizontal hyperbola because the x value is positive. That's our major axis. So let's start by completing the square. So we move the 84 over and rearrange the left-hand side, just like we've done with all of the other conic sections that we've talked about. Leave a square hole, and I'm going to leave this a plus and keep the negative with the 4y squared for now. There. That's step 1. Step 2, factor out a. So I factor out a 4 for the x's. That leaves me x squared plus 4x plus box. And for the y's, I need to factor out this negative 4. That means I'm going to change the signs for the y squared. That'll be minus 8y. Now, I'm not going to change the sign here because I'm always going to add a positive number. And right now there's nothing there, so changing it to a subtraction would be meaningless. So now we drop this number down, cut it in half, and then square it into the whole. There's negative 4, and square that into the whole. So we get plus 4 and plus 16. And now we need to ask, how much did we really add when we put plus 4? 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times negative 4 is negative 64. Careful with the signs. So that's 2016. So that's 36. And now we factor. So we're going to have a 4 in front of the x's. We're going to have a negative 4 in front of the y's. It's going to be an x and a y. And then we just drop down these numbers. So y minus 4, x plus 2. And there it is. And one more step to get it into general equation. We need to divide through by 36. So 4 divided by 36 is 1/9. So we'll have x plus 2 squared over 9 minus y minus 4 squared over 9 equals 1. Now, we have the same number on the top and the bottom here. It's still going to be a hyperbola. That's okay. So, let's go on to find these things we need to find. Center. There's general form. Center. Left 2, up 4. Negative 2, 4. Let's find the vertices. And let's go ahead and say what A and B are. A, 3. B, also 3. Now, we're going to count 3 in the major axis because A is always in the major axis. So let's go over and go ahead and I'm going to scoot this up now. Let's start our sketch. So we're centered at negative 2, 4. So I'm going to leave myself some extra room in the second quadrant. Okay, so negative 2, 4. There's the center. And I'm going to count over by A. And since A is in the x direction, I'm going to count over in the x direction. So 1, 2, 3 that way. And I'll go ahead and do a couple more. And 1, 2, 3 this way. So there's a vertex, count 3 over, count 3 over, there's another vertex. Okay. Now, foci. Oh wait, let me write this down. So I counted in the x direction, so I'll put a plus or minus with the x. Foci. I need c. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. A is 3, so 9. B is 3, so 9 equals c squared, 18. So c is the square root of 18, which is a little bit more than 4, because that would be the square root of 16. So I'm going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4, and just a little bit past that. There's my focus. Same thing over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and just a little bit past that. And since we're graphing this imprecisely, let's go ahead and make sure we say what our coordinates are. So we start from the center, negative 2, and count right and left by the square root of 18. And keep the y value of 4. So here, there we have it. Center, vertices, foci. So we move on to the asymptotes. Again, we're going to use this equation, point-slope equation, for a line, because our asymptotes are lines. And so let's go ahead and count over here. So we know this distance right here is A. That's in the x direction. So we're going to count up and down by the distance B, which is also 3. So up 3, down 3. So I need to give myself some more dashes here. So up 3, that's B, and then down 3. Same distance. And from the other vertex, there's A, then I'm going to go up B and down B. So there's A, there's B. And then I draw in the asymptotes. Dot, 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 dot. Dotted line. And the other asymptote, dot, 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 dot. Okay. And the equations, y minus the y value again from the center, which is 4, equals plus or minus the slope. 3 is the rise, 3 is the run. So it's 1. So plus or minus, and there's no point in putting a 1 out there, so I'm going to leave it off. X minus negative 2, or in other words, x plus 2. There it is. And now draw in from the vertex, the hyperbola, approach the asymptotes going each direction, and we're done. So we'll probably have a quiz over hyperbolas and parabolas either Friday or Tuesday, depending on whether you have an A or a B class. And then we'll review, maybe do some new stuff, and the class period after that, we will have a test over circles, hyperbolas, parabolas, ellipses. All right.